You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SDSU podcast. I'm Andre Hagberdian and joined by Paul Garrison, my co-host. What's up, Paul?
What's going on, Andre? Are we a little lazy, man? What's up with us? We've only been covering the practices and the scrimmages and produced tons of articles, but we've been slacking a little bit on the podcast.
I know we hit them with 4 podcasts in a week.
Our averages are still good.
The average is good, yeah, but it's been like a week and a half. We had people asking us to do a live podcast after the scrimmage on Saturday night, which I didn't walk out of Snapdragon until like 10:30, 10:45, so that was hard. I even had somebody ask me to get on Spaces and do a play-by-play of the scrimmage on Twitter.
I think that might have been illegal.
Yeah,
against regulation. No, I we've obviously been very busy, but I definitely think that probably could have squeezed one in, maybe. But here's this one, and I'm pretty excited about being able to talk about San Diego State, the scrimmage, and I actually think it's a little bit better that we're doing this now because this will come out on Thursday morning. San Diego State is presently like having a scrimmage at Snapdragon where they're formulating their final depth chart. But we can talk about this last scrimmage, and then you covered practice. And so I think that, after they watched film, the staff watched film, the way that they rolled out some of the different things and the different players at the practice, I think gives an indication a little bit, at least how they're thinking. So I think it actually is a really good spot to be able to record a podcast.
Yeah, the scrimmage went well. Our typical scrimmages in past years that we've covered the team, most of it is the defense is great. What's wrong with the offense?
Right.
Or the passing game didn't do enough, especially it's last Saturday's scrimmage on campus. I think the offense committed. I thought I counted 7 or 8. Dallas Branch said 9. I'm going to go with him because he probably was told that by the coaches. I mean, the number of interceptions, the fumbles by the quarterbacks and the receivers and running backs, the offense definitely cleaned a lot of that up. Now, they still had, a couple turnovers, 2 that got returned by the defense for touchdowns. But only 2, yeah. They put up 52 points, and now that's misleading because I think the last 3 touchdowns were when the ball started in the red zone. So, you can't fault the defense. It's not like they gave up, long drives, but putting it in end zone is obviously still appreciated and favored over not putting it in the end zone. A lot of good things from the offense, but I think the biggest thing was first 2 drives, first team offense versus first team defense, length of the field, passing touchdowns. I think that's what got most people excited because of how they did it, who they did it against, and how they scored, which was passing. What'd you think?
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, in contrast to the scrimmage the week prior, the defense wasn't able to get off the field on 3rd and short.
Yeah.
Who knows how those drives the week before would have ended, but the defense won more of the 3rd and short yardage, and that prevented those drives from being able to be extended. But I think if you're looking at, if you were a fan there and you were watching the scrimmage, I think the control that Jalen Maiden had throughout, not just in those opening drives, but just his ability to read the entire field, his ability to, even in a green jersey, buy time and know how to use his feet. I think that has to be really, really encouraging. Somebody commented on a message board, and I thought it made a lot of sense. This isn't a game. They didn't perform like that against Ohio. The flip side of it is going to your point, if the defense had dominated again, we would be asking the question, where's the offense? Well, this is part of the process. The offense was way better this scrimmage versus the second one. And I thought a lot of it also had to do with Keenan Christian. I thought he was really good. I thought the same kind of comment about being able to extend drives. I thought there was a few times where he should have been tackled and he should have been stopped. And he was just the better football player and extended drives and caught first downs. I thought he ran enough inside. He obviously had one huge gain inside. I think that's where his I don't know, his reputation is as an outside runner, and obviously that's in his repertoire, but he's gonna make NFL money if he can run inside and allow, I mean, you could imagine teams being able to spread it out, and then the gashes that he would be able to get with his speed, and I think you saw a little bit of that in the scrimmage. I think a lot of encouraging things as far as the offense. I like to get into this a little bit more, but what did you see? I mean, we're all kind of like trying to dissect and understand what it is that Ryan Lindley is doing, his strength-based offense. What did you see in terms of the way he designed the offense to be able to feature Aztecs' best players?
Well, I think what he's been talking about all year is basically seen in plays. A lot of 12 personnel, a lot of featuring running backs and tight ends, and using the wide receivers to pick up first downs, to keep the defense honest. They don't want boxes stacked. Now, teams are going to stack the box anyway until there are some wide receivers that they're going to be, frightened by beating them deep. I think they'll give up the short stuff. But I think we've seen a lot more variety in terms of play calling and formations and motions than we did last year or the year before with Hecklinski. And I think those are the things that can confuse defenses, confuse linebackers, confuse safeties who may not know, okay, this guy's going in motion. Now that we have two on this side, who's going to be the tight end that's going to run out for a pass? Who's going to stay in and block? Or maybe both tight ends are going to go out for a pass, which we saw very little of under the old offense. And so I think we see a lot of that, using guys in various systems. I mean, Balin Brooks, who's a big receiver, a possession guy, one play he catches a pass over the middle about 20 yards. The next play, he comes in motion from the left of the quarterback, takes the handoff behind the line of scrimmage and runs kind of a sweep, run up to the right. A jet sweep, yeah. We didn't see BJ Busby was like the last receiver we saw that got a lot of those calls. I don't think we saw anybody last year get many of those.
Or you get, or it was to Jordan Bird, and everybody
right.
everybody in the stadium knew that.
Not a shock to anybody.
No, yeah. Right. And so I think running that to the receiver is a good point.
Yeah, and I think these are different things that's going to keep the defense on its toes, the defensive coordinator, that we really didn't see a lot of in the past offense. So I think everything Ryan Lindley has been saying, we saw to an extent, not just this past Saturday, but the Saturday before. It just happened to work a little bit better recently, right. This past Saturday than the one before.
Thought the same thing. I think what really stood out to me was I felt like for the first time since Daniel Bellinger was part of the team, that the tight ends really were where the offense kind of hinged on. I think you're seeing it now with the Giants and the way in which Daniel Bellinger is utilized. And it's not just the passing game; it's his ability to blocks down on a defensive lineman. So he makes a play from the secondary that's like the same play that they have every other day, and he makes it look completely different because this tight end is doing this weird stuff that you don't normally see, and so it disguises what it is in the secondary. And I thought that the tight ends kind of filled that role. I thought last year, they really were missing that toughness, and they really were missing that unpredictability that can come from dynamic athletes at the tight end position, because you don't know if it's going to be a run or pass. You don't know if you're going to be able to run a screen. You don't know if you're going to be able to get down the field, because they have these kinds of athletes that can stretch the field. And so I thought that not only did he use the packages, but I thought he used them effectively. Whether it was, a screen pass to the tight ends, they caught a number of screen passes to the running backs. using the tight ends to get other people open, using them in the middle of the field. Obviously, in the red zone, I think they scored 2 touchdowns. I thought it was great to see Jay Rudolph after his injuries and the different parts look like the dynamic Jay Rudolph that we saw his freshman year. And so I thought that was really good. And it could have been a third touchdown, but they called it back, a legal procedure with to Logan Tanner. And so I just thought that no matter which tight end was playing, they were the centerpiece of the offense, and it gave the offense that characteristic that Coach Lindley talked about when we interviewed him, which is he wants to make the defense adjust to the offense. They want to bring what they do, and they want to force the defense to adjust. And I thought that aggressiveness was seen. And then, I think it cannot be said enough how good Jalen Maiden was, because you got to have somebody who's able to do that. And he not only had those 2 drives where he led them to touchdowns, but like late when they started getting a little bit more pressure, he wasn't forcing the ball.
Yeah.
He was throwing it out of bounds. He was living to fight another down. He was doing all the things that you want a veteran quarterback who's been around it, even though he's a veteran quarterback who hasn't really been around it. And I just thought that he was completely in control, easily the best player on the field in terms of just the outcome of the game. If not, I'm not necessarily talking about his draft status, but just he was the guy. And I think that, when you talk about Hecklinski and you talk about Coach Hecklinski, who, as we've talked about, lots of coaches who are really good coaches don't have success in places, but he would always talk about, the QB being the most dangerous player on the field. And it's just it's an irony that that Jalen Maiden, the quarterback who was fourth on his depth chart, is the one who's become the most dangerous player on the field for the Aztecs. And I think that, as long as he had a stupid turnover, we talked to him post game. He said that can't happen. We got to end it with a kick. It's better than all this stuff. And okay, so he still is on that. He's paying attention to that. But you accept all the dynamic stuff that he did with that one turnover. You accept that kind of a day, 4 touchdowns, 1 turnover. And so I thought that was really interesting how, he was able to not have the stupid turnover, right? Because it was like in the scrimmage before, you and I are standing in the end zone and we're saying, okay, he played pretty good. He played pretty good. And I said, absolutely, because he hasn't turned over the ball. And then it was not like we jinxed him. I mean, it was not 2 snaps later he's throwing his terrible interception to Vaikaho, backed up in his own end zone. You're like, well, there it is. Never mind. Article would be written different, and that didn't really come about because on turnover aside, he was sensational.
Yeah, just getting back to the Keenan Kristen thing that you mentioned, he led the team at 77 rushing yards on 13 carries, about I think 6 yards, almost 6 yards a carry.
That's
pretty
fabulous.
good. He caught 1 pass for 21 yards, but there was one.
Do you remember that one though? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, it was a screen, right? It
was a screen. Dallas Branch is right there, all conference performer, and he knows to cut it back inside, and he just completely set up his line to come in and take that. That's a really, really good play that looked like it was going nowhere. And because he's a veteran and knows what he's doing, was able to put it into 21 yards.
One of his runs, though, I think is the key, is because he took a pass, he took a handoff and went right. And I think maybe his inclination typically is to keep going right and go past the tackle. But he cut it inside the right tackle. I don't know if that was Azo or Murao, but he cut it inside and got a big gain. And I think Coach Oak said afterwards, when they asked him about who he thought did well in the running backs, he mentioned that like the week before he didn't make the right cut, but this week he did. And I'm pretty sure he was talking about that play 100%. That both you and I talked about when we saw each other towards in the second half. Jalen Armstead had a nice day, 52 rushing yards and a touchdown. Martin Blake had 26. I mean, I think if we wanted to talk about which walk-on is deserving of a scholarship, I think Martin Blake is at the top of that list because of the various things that he is able to do. I mean, Coach Hoke has sang his praises multiple times.
I'm not ready yet.
You're not ready yet?
I'm not ready yet. I mean, you just look at Mekhi Shaw, you look at Devon Celestine, they had to produce in the game first.
Right, yeah.
before they were able to get there. But I think he's like, if you look at the suspects, I completely agree with you. Just pointing out
I
that
mean,
they need to see it in the game, right?
he did produce last year in limited snaps, but I get you. I'm not saying he's going to get one before the start of fall camp, but I think pretty soon as the season starts, he's going to get touches and he's going to produce. And I think they've got 3 open scholarships with with Tucker's departure, and then Raphael Williams. Not sure, even though he's ineligible, he still could sit out. But Coach Hoke was asked after practice on Tuesday why he's not at practice, and he said he's still trying to figure things out,
No,
which was a very
cryptic.
innocuous comment. And then he mentioned he's
Yeah,
got a back injury too, but like typically the people who are banged up, we still see at practice, warming up with the trainers, and we haven't seen him at all. So that made me think that there's a potential, that he may be thinking about moving on, going somewhere else. I don't know. But the way he said he's trying to figure things out kind of made me think that maybe he's also not going to be on the team. But that's a different topic. But I think that yeah, I
that's
mean,
huge. That's huge if that's part of it. It'd be a shame because
yeah,
I think that it's just something that's really really interesting, and I know it's really hard because you don't want you don't want the FBS school to use the FCS as their de facto minor leagues and stuff like that. Although with NIL and stuff like that, maybe they do. But just the idea that you know he's been electric in practice at times. A
yeah.
lot of times on the side, and obviously a back is so finicky, and to have a bad back
Yeah.
when you're young like that. But yeah, wow, that's big news. I didn't know that. What about Kyron White? Was there anything in addition with Kyron White? Same thing. He hasn't been at practice.
No, I mean Cyrus Fiaseu was back in pads, or at least
Okay.
shells, and
Great news.
practice. Great, good news. But Kyron White was not seen on the sideline at the scrimmage and has not at practice on Tuesday. So we haven't gotten anything official on his status.
All right, so
So
let's do this. And we can go back to the defense. So I think we should cover that at the end. From what you saw on Tuesday, and where we were at the end of spring, give me 5 players who you think have helped themselves in terms of playing time, in terms of in any terms. And you can take that anywhere you want. 5 players who have really helped themselves this fall camp.
I'm going to start with Philippe Wesley.
Yeah, good call.
We knew Makai Shaw from what he did last year, although we hadn't seen him in that number 1 role. We saw him in the number 3 role. So there were questions there, but I think the coaching staff feels good about that. But they're looking for that number 2 guy, right? Josh Nicholson could have been that guy, but he got banged up first practice of fall camp. We haven't really seen much of him, even though he's been at practice, but hasn't really been playing a lot of 11-on-11s, hasn't played in scrimmages. Raphael Williams, obviously, we just talked about his status is ineligible, but Wesley has really stepped up. Every practice I've been to, he's had this great connection with Jalen Maiden. Short stuff, deep stuff, intermediate stuff. He seems to be kind of Jalen's security blanket when he's going through his progressions, and always can kind of see Philippe in the corner of his eye. He caught a touchdown, the second touchdown of the scrimmage where he broke a tackle and dove into the end zone. Those are plays that receivers need to make, right? The yards after catch that has been lacking maybe from the wide receivers. Jesse Matthews, Tyrell Shavers were great receivers, possession guys, could get deep once in a while, but it didn't seem like they had that breakaway speed a lot of times. And Wesley could be a guy that can flash that. And I remember the spring game, he also looked pretty good. And so he's kind of carried that over. So he's one guy that has jumped out at me. Chris Johnson, corner,
Oh, there you go.
was running with the ones
Again.
on Tuesday.
He started, right? I think did he
Yeah.
start in the
He
scrimmage?
started at the scrimmage too.
Wow.
Yeah, so he's gone from maybe number 5 corner last year as a true freshman to number two, possibly behind Des Malone. But he's confident. He plays tough, covers well. I think he's in line to be that number two guy and that starter opposite Des Malone. So I really liked what I've seen from him.
I want to comment on both of those guys.
Go
Um,
for it.
the first one with Philippe Wesley, I thought that his touchdown, I thought it was not just like okay. I thought it
Mhm.
was really good. I mean, not only to be able to, I mean, make, I think it was JD Coffey coming over and making him miss, but to just the way that he did it, his quick feet, his athleticism was really, really good. And so I think that's a great call. As Jalen made in his totals on multiple occasions, everyone's kind of stepped up in the wide receiver group from this perspective. And I think, top of the list, I think that's a great call with him. And then Chris Johnson, I'll be honest with you, man. I think that is just wild. I mean, I was surprised that he saw the field last year, but then that he was able to come and seemingly be in position for sure to be in the rotation, maybe even to start, is pretty amazing because when you're talking about if it looks the way that it looks, which is Des Malone being the starter, which he was most of last year, that means that he's having to like replace somebody in Dallas Branch who was an all league performer. And honorable mention, All Mountain West, somebody that when we talked to Coach Maddox at the beginning of the fall camp was just like, look, he was playing the best at the end.
Yeah.
And I don't, and every time that I've seen Dallas Branch play, he looks every bit of like a veteran, physical, like everything you could possibly want out of a cornerback. And so if he's able to play better than him, that's saying something. I agree. I think those are like really, really crazy developments. Not Philippe Wesley so much, but Chris Johnson, just because of the guys that he's going against. Noah Tumlin, he's kind of taken over from Breon Penny as
Yeah.
the scrimmage guru, just having great game after great game, had the pick six. And so you continue to see what he brings to the table.
He had a really nice diving interception, taking it away from a receiver yesterday or Tuesday at practice. So
I mean, that's what I mean. Those are huge things. And obviously, he's played a lot of football. Um, you know, in high school, quarterbacks are typically the most athletic player on the field. He was the quarterback at Mira Mesa. And to be able to even be, with those guys as a true sophomore is just something else. But to even potentially be above those guys, that's pretty crazy.
all right, I got three more. All right.
All right, what do we got?
I'm going to stay in the secondary, and I'm going to say Marcus Ratcliffe.
Interesting. Okay.
And I'll tell you what, when Patrick McMorris obviously was the Aztec starter all through spring camp, that was a foregone conclusion. We didn't even think about the competition at Aztec, right? But then he transfers, the depth chart lists him and Marcus Ratcliffe and Max Garrison. But then you got Kyron White that got listed back. You had Jatavius McGee. We heard Coach Maddox say I can move Barfield to Aztec. And coming into fall camp, I was fully prepared and ready to say one of those veterans, experienced guys are going to be the starter at Aztec.
Right.
But those guys don't have a shot because I think Marcus Ratcliffe has solidified that spot as the starter.
So there wasn't even a sniff of that in practice?
No.
Okay, because I thought that was an interesting part about the scrimmage that I thought we'd get to later.
Yeah. But no, not during Tuesday's practice. Marcus was with the ones playing Aztec. Now, Max Garrison didn't play, and who had been battling with Marcus and sharing first team snaps. He didn't play in the scrimmage. He was back at practice on Tuesday, but he was running, threes. And maybe that's because they want him getting back into,
Who were the twos?
JD Coffey was the backup Aztec on Tuesday's practice. And so I think Marcus, has taken a grasp of that. And for a true freshman, obviously he was there in the spring, but he's still a true freshman. It's still his first 100%. Year in the program. I think because he's been able to, beat out, the experienced guys. Now, Kyron White, obviously we talked earlier, he hasn't been on practice. We don't really know. But if Kyron White, I think he would have probably beat out Kyron White as well with the way that he's played. He's rangy, he's lengthy, he can cover, he can tackle. So he's my number 3 guy that's on the up. Martin Blake, we talked about him earlier.
Okay. All right.
I honestly think Martin Blake is he's gonna be the third wide running back, and he's gonna be getting carries and catches. And I think there will be some games where he'll be the lead running back in terms of touches. I think he's that productive when he gets the ball. He's only 5'6", but like as I said, he can catch the ball, he can block, he played some fullback last year and floated out and caught a big pass. So he can do so many things, and I think he's definitely a guy that's on the up.
Yeah, and I thought too. I mean, just with that, I Max Garrison being out in the spring game, or a spring game, a little different part of the calendar. In the last scrimmage,
Yeah.
it was Martin Blake who was that second returner, and
Yeah.
you can see it as far as somebody who can block. If they decide to kick it short and go away from them, like you would feel like you would be able to do something with the ball. That's a great call. One more.
And then one more. I'm gonna go with the defensive line and Tupu Alualu.
Nice.
I think he was battling with Darian Dalton for that starting defensive tackle spot. And I think he's another guy that's been running with the ones really for the last week or so, from practices, from scrimmages. He's the coaches always praise him anytime they're asked about people on the defensive line. Dan Opoko, mentioned Tupu as a guy who's impressed him and one of the newcomers. He's a guy I think that's going to be a big part of the defensive line, playing that interior, and not just stopping the run, but getting pressure on the quarterback. So he's a 5th guy on my list.
Nice. So I'm gonna go with my five, and I agree on Philippe Wesley. He's definitely my list of guys who I thought who this fall have really helped themselves and um really look to be in some way different than what they've had. And that is a scholarship wide receiver who comes in and actually produces. They don't have to get a transfer or a walk on. So I thought that he's really helped himself. Mine, and again, these aren't necessarily in any order, but I thought Josh Hunter.
Yeah.
I thought that he really helped himself. It was hard for me not to notice that the 2 touchdowns that were scored by missed tackles in the open field. One by Devon Celestine, the other by JD Coffey, and his reputation since high school. And obviously Coach Deacon, repeated that for us when we interviewed him, is as one of the best open field tacklers. And
Yeah.
it's it might be some other people's mistakes gets to elevate that skill. But where was he running with the post scrimmage? Where was he running in the next practice?
He was starting at Boundary Warrior.
See, that's huge. I mean, Devon Celestine started a lot of. Was it Devon or was it?
So Celestine and Barfield, I think, switched off on the Field Warrior side.
Okay.
So it depended, but I think it was Hunter and then Eric Butler backing him up on the other side.
No, and I think that's huge. I mean, he's a redshirt freshman who, again, it's that same thing with Chris Johnson, who you just wouldn't expect to be able to make as much headway. Chris Johnson, I agreed with you. We talked enough about him, but I thought that was really, really good. I'm gonna have to go with Tobin Odell. You're talking about a redshirt freshman walk-on QB who I don't think it's any exaggeration was the only other quarterback at the scrimmage who looked competent. I mean, I think that given what Kyle Crum, who our first interview on this podcast ever, great person, we've seen great things about it. But if you're just judging by the scrimmage, did not look quite ready to be rolled out there as the backup. I thought it was really interesting with Tobin Odell how all throughout Kyle Crum would start the rep, and then on second down they would bring Tobin Odell in almost as if they were trying to get him to practice what it would be like if, God forbid, right, Jalen Maiden got hurt, he had to be ran out there. So I just thought it was really interesting because you see him in the first scrimmage, you'd see him in practice, and he's just kind of running for his life because the defensive line is just destroying the offensive line. And so it doesn't even really give like a full shape to like an offense. And it's really hard to see like, okay, is any good, whatever. He was the third quarterback, obviously Lee Wamabai, and the jam fingers hitting it on a helmet of a defender. Maybe he wouldn't have got those reps if Lee had been hurt. But I thought he looked really good. I mean, short of like, maybe the worst pick six that has ever been thrown in human history. Short of that one, I think he was 6 of 7. And again, he would have had that touchdown had it not been called back from the illegal procedure. And he looked like he had a clue. He was confident. And so I would just say that that's a pretty remarkable rise.
Yeah.
If he is truly in contention for any idea of getting into this depth chart. So he was my third. My fourth that I thought, has really helped himself, and it's a little bit challenging to be able to say it, but I'm going to go with Dean Abdullah. This is a guy who played tackle, I think as American River College, low in weight, right? He's slight in his frame, played some last year, just has great technique, great athleticism. I mean, really good athleticism for a guy his size. And they bring in, one of the top offensive linemen from the class of 2020. And that guy produces so much so that they had him as the starting right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And as good as, they're trying to find a way to get Miles Moreau on the field, but he isn't gonna replace Cade Bennett. He's not gonna replace Ross Ulugalu-Masuli. And you think, okay, well then it's absolutely he's gonna be replacing Dean Abdullah. No, that Abdullah has been so good that Miles Moreau is gonna ride the pine unless they can move him to a different position. And I think that's pretty spectacular. I mean, you would not have thought that, like, if Dean Abdullah was going to hold down the right guard, it would only be because Miles Moreau was overrated and he couldn't play. And that clearly is not the case. Not only has Coach Hope talked about him multiple practices, but just the fact that they're going to play him at a position because they think he's potentially one of their 5 best line.
Yeah.
And so I think that speaks volumes to where Dean Abdullah is, because I think in an ideal world, I think they wanted Moreau to start, and Abdullah didn't let him. He didn't let him take his spot. And so I think that would be my number 4, is just like a guy who's really helped himself a whole bunch because of what he was able to do. And then for my 5th guy, and this is a little bit interesting. Whatever. I'm not sure exactly, but I'm going with Cam Harple. I really thought that if Jay Rudolph had gotten healthy, that he's your second tight end. And obviously he caught a pass. He absolutely destroyed. Where he could have destroyed would have been a penalty on a read option at the goal line, where Kyle Crum, doesn't give the handoff. He rolls out and he's just met by Noah Tumblin. And then he just blindsides him, but in a way that he doesn't get called for the penalty, and springs him for an easy touchdown. But it was like one of those, like if it was 1992, Noah Tumblin would be in the hospital. It was one of those, like it was just so set up, but with all the rules and stuff, the way they should be. He was protected and he was okay. But it was a great block. He was in position, did what he needed to do, and just decleated him. And he looks healthy. And even though he is, Cam Harple is ahead of him, and he was the guy who was working with the first team offense. So those would be my 5. I think your 5 are right too. I just think that those were the guys that stood out to me.
But so Philippe Wesley was our only overlapping?
No, Chris Johnson.
Chris Johnson, okay, got
it. Yeah. Chris Johnson and Philippe Wesley, I think were 2 of them. So now we got to go the other way, bro. This is one that's not fun. Remember, these are college kids.
Right.
Give me the 5 downs.
Well, I think my choices. This is hard. I think I have 3 or 4. The 5th one might be a little bit reaching. But like if someone's moving up, that means somebody's moving down. And I think that's how I'm
Completely.
portraying it. I mean, based on what you talked about with Miles Morale, Brandon Crenshaw Dixon has to be on this
Absolutely.
list.
Completely.
We know what happened in the spring, getting second team reps, but then he ends up first on at right tackle. A lot of talk. Coach Goff talked about the leadership and Brandon Crenshaw Dixon providing that leadership. Coach Hoke, I think after the first practice, was
Yep.
asked about him and said, he's a good leader. He's
I
had
even I'll even
experience.
go I'll even go further. I don't even think if I remember and again my memory could be off, but I don't even think he was asked. I
Right.
think he just sort of offered like
But he
BCB needs to
said,
step up.
what did he
BCB
say?
needs to
But
step
we
up.
we need more from him.
100%. That's what he's like.
We
He
need him to
offered it. Like
show
he was
more or something
looking to
like
talk about it completely. Yeah.
that. And then, I think if Azzo was still the starting right tackle as of Tuesday, I would say, okay, well, maybe it's still similar to spring and they're still trying to get the young guys. But with Morale in there at right tackle now, I'm pretty
Tuesday as well.
Tuesday as well.
Okay.
Um, it's safe to say right now that BCD is not guaranteed a starting spot come August 26th. And I think that you have to put him on this 5 down list if that's the case.
Completely.
Also, to go with your Tobin Odell, you also have to mention Kyle Crum, right? He did not play well in the past Saturday scrimmage on campus. A lot of turnovers. Fumbled the ball in the end zone on a handoff that led to a safety. None of the quarterbacks really played well, right? And I think Ryan Lindley let him have it.
Yeah.
After
Completely.
that, and we heard all that. But the second play of the scrimmage on Saturday, he rolls out, gets flushed, drops the ball, gets returned for a touchdown. And then at that point, Tobin Odell came in and played really well,
Yeah.
which is the reason why you had him on your 5 up. But Kyle Crum struggled, and then Coach Oak said, we don't know who the backup quarterback is on Saturday night.
Yep.
And I asked him again on Tuesday after practice. He said, we still don't know, and we need to figure it out. So that tells me that whoever was a backup quarterback before is not playing to the level that's expected. And that was Kyle Crum. Now, Leo Amavai has been banged up a little bit. He jammed a couple fingers or one finger on a helmet. So, maybe he would have stepped up into that backup role if he was healthy. But as you mentioned about Tobin Odell playing well, Kyle Crum has not necessarily. And so he'd have to be one of those guys to drop. Third guy, I would say Noah Avenger.
Yeah.
Because as we talked about, there's 5 corners that should be playing or can be playing. There's no room. Right? Chris Johnson was the 5th guy last year. As a true freshman, that made sense. Now, that 5th guy with Chris Johnson being maybe number 2 guy, somebody had to drop. At the end of spring, it was Noah Tumblin, but he's kind of played himself up to that second team, and Noah Avenger has dropped. And at Tuesday's practice, I even saw Avenger playing some snaps at Warrior with like third team. So I don't know. I didn't get a chance to ask Coach Maddox after practice because I was talking to Coach Hoke. But I was curious about the rationale there, if it was just something they wanted to see, or whether it was because he was the 5th corner and they needed to find ways to maybe get him on the field other ways.
Yeah.
But I think he's a guy that's probably more of a downward trend than an upward trend, just based on the depth chart and who's been out there at corner. I guess this is the tough part, and I'll go with two more offensive linemen.
Okay.
Tommy Mirabella.
Ooh, that's a good call. Yeah.
Because
he was handed the center job.
Yeah, and he came in as a starting center or right guard, right? There was talk where if Ross is at center, maybe Mirabella plays right guard like he played last year for a couple games when Ross was out. But, he's been, Dean Abdullah is right guard. So Mirabella is basically, on that downward trend himself on the offensive line to, backup center, backup right guard. And then with the versatility of who's at center, right guard, and right tackle, all 3 of those guys can play all 3 of those positions. So if one of them goes down, no guarantee that Mirabelle's the next guy up. They might move a guy over and then bring in somebody at right tackle. So who knows where Mirabelle falls in that, hierarchy of how we want to get the best 5 guys on the field. So he would be my number 4 guy. Honestly, number five, I'm reaching here. I felt confident with the top four, but I'm having number five. Yeah, I mean, I had Kyle. I'm listing Kyle Stanback here only because he was supposed to be like vying for left tackle. Coach Goff talked about how athletic he was, how he had added weight. We haven't really seen that, and he's kind of some of the times he's been there during practice, like he's been getting yanked for missing an assignment
Right.
or not running the right procedure or the technique. And so if I had to pick a fifth guy, I'd put him in there.
Nice. No, I like that a lot. I think I don't like that Kyle Steinbach is one of them, but I think your list is really, really good. The first three, I agree with you completely. I think that, Noah Avenger, he was the hot name. We tried to get, Coach Maddox to, praise Des Malone a little bit. And he's like, well, actually it's, it's Avenger it's Noah Avenger who's been the guy. He's the guy who's had the great summer. He's the guy who's had the great spring. And so just to see him, like I mean, talk about, I think that's news. That's huge. It's huge news because the other side of this is, there's always been that talk of like, okay, if you got five corners, could one of those guys play warrior? And so I think that that's a great like call that he has, and especially because he's played so much. This is a
Yeah.
guy who he was a big time recruit. Um, And I think again, it shows the level of competition and going back to our ups, of what Chris Johnson has been able to do. So I completely agree there. Kyle Crum, it's interesting because I would say like in the time that we've seen him, these last two scrimmages was the first time that he looked like a freshman.
Yeah.
He's always had a moxie about him. He's always had, and again, he scored that touchdown that we were describing earlier. He had a long pass to Balaam Brooks that went for a big completion. But he's had huge turnovers, and the reality of it is, whoever that backup QB is, needs to be able to hand the ball off to Keenan Christian and occasionally go over the top or for a short first down to be able to make the chains move. I mean, that's what that guy is going to need to be able to do. And he's not only had turnovers. I mean, they've been huge. The pick six in the week before with Josh Hunter. Um, Obviously that safety that you're talking about and the touchdown to Dom Oliver. And so I think that it has to be a down, and it's so hard because he's so young. I mean, the idea that a guy who's a redshirt freshman could even be truly considered as a backup, and you wouldn't even, you know, feel like you're completely overmatched, which was where we thought he was going into fall camp, is just remarkable. But yeah, I think the last couple of weeks and the reality of them playing Tobin and Bell, Lee Wamavai's, um, I guess around the rumor mill is that he's had a good fall camp as well and kind of bridged that gap. Um, so I think that that he's definitely has to be there. BCD, as you said, this is a guy who you're talking should be in contention for an all conference, which was what Coach Goff set as the expectation for him. Again, I mean, if they're doing something crazy and they're doing this on purpose and showing us all this stuff because BCD is the starting left tackle and they want Ohio to make their game plan as if Christian Jones is there or something weird. Like it's fine. Like we don't have any inside information on. We're just doing by what we perceive,
Yeah.
and it seems like that's been that Christian Jones has solidified himself as left tackle, and that seemed to be the case, and that would mean BCD is behind him, which is just crazy. I mean, completely unexpected, and especially considering that you do have if it works out the way that that it's looking like it works out, and play right tackle, you could actually have an offensive line composed of all upper class, and they go
Yeah.
from like having freshmen last year to having guys who just starting, guys who haven't really played, and you could have like veteran players, depending on however you count Moreau's years, And so it's baffling, to be honest with you, that because I think you given how many procedure penalties and the struggles of the offensive line, like I think Christian Jones has to be significantly better to be able to get the nod over the guy who was starting at left tackle last year. So then I think those three we agreed on. One guy that I would put in there, and it's maybe it's a little bit unfair, I don't know, but Kyron White. I think that you know he gets switched to linebacker because according to Coach Maddox, they think he's one of their best 11 defenders, and he's starting as the linebacker in the first initial kind of stuff that we were seeing in spring. And to go from, and he seemingly played okay, there was some injuries things or something that he was a little bit didn't get as many reps as maybe you would have thought. But everybody said I think Kyron White's playing good. I think Kyron White's playing good. He's the time that he's played in the games, he's looked good. And so then he goes into the summer. Again, I saw him play Aztec. He looked like the veteran guy. He was coaching the other DBs, and then to just whatever's taken place with him, the injuries that are there. I think that maybe it's unfair, but it's just what it is. I mean, the idea that Marcus Ratcliffe could be a true freshman and replace this guy who has played the position, has seen time in the position, has looked good in the position, has that physical veteran component to it. I put Kyron White as my fourth one. And then I think for the fifth one, and again, I agree with you that this is where things become challenging. It's hard exactly where to place it. If I had to say one guy who I thought is a little bit of a down, it's going to be Max Garrison. I really thought that he had the inside track to start as the Aztec, and again, he's a young guy. I think the accolades of him being a football player, as everyone has said. Um, but I think that there was hope with the athleticism, um, the way he plays so downhill that it wasn't going to be as heavily in favor of Marcus Ratcliffe. And injuries happen, and so maybe that's the reason for it. And you just lose those valuable reps and that opportunity. But I think a guy who I think started with as the starting Aztec and looked to be that replacement. But it wouldn't shock me if against Ohio he's not even rotating with them. I think you have to consider that Max Garrison could be that fifth down. And again, it's just because we picked five ups that we had to pick five downs. I think it's probably honestly three that we both agreed on, and probably three is where it was. But just for that symmetry with those five, if you're forced to pick one, I think there. But I think Tommy Mirabella though is another good call that I hadn't considered that probably would be above, and maybe Max Garrison would be sixth.
Yeah, always interesting to compare and contrast our lists. I know we did a top 10 ranking of players regardless of like position, and we definitely got some commentary from folks, from fans, from all sorts of people about where we ranked certain people, and two specialists in the top 5 or top 6 I think ruffled a few feathers, but hey, we Jack Browning is the only one on the team that's got a preseason player of the year nomination and is on 2 watch lists. So it's not just Paul and I that think that he's arguably the number one player for his position on the team. It's probably not the best thing for your team for a specialist, a kicker, to be your best player. But that's just how it is right now. If we redo this list 6 weeks, 6 weeks into the season, it'll be completely different. And maybe other guys, maybe Jalen Maiden will be number one, right? Quarterback.
And again, the list that we made was never about who was the most valuable.
Right.
It was just who is the best at the position, regardless of the importance of said position. And Ryan Wintermeyer can play, and he does a lot of good things. But before we get out of here, man, let's turn a little bit to the defense and what you saw in the scrimmage, because the flip side of those holes that the offensive line was opening up means that they were opening it up on the defensive line.
Yeah.
Coach Hoke called the defensive line progress, said that, it's exactly what they expected it to be. Where do you see the defensive line in terms of its overall strength? And then if you were to guess how deep the rotation would be, actually, let's do this. Let's say they're going to stop the rotation at six. Who are your six linemen?
Health permitting. I'm
Help
gonna
me.
assume
Garrett Fountain's back.
so it'll be I see Garrett Fountain, Tupu Alualu, and Opoko as the starters.
Oh, okay. Even though
And then
Drager's been there.
yeah.
Okay.
And then I see Wyatt Drager, Dom Oliver, and I'm gonna go Darian Dalton. Either Darian or Sammy Tulu Halamaka. But I think I'd give it to Darian Dalton.
Yeah.
That would be the six.
Okay. I like it. Okay. So let
Did
me
I
ask
leave
you a couple.
anybody? Did I leave anybody out?
Well, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you because I would agree with you about Darian Dalton only because it seemed like they were very uncomfortable behind Tupu Alu at the scrimmage. I mean, they slid Wyatt Drager inside. Um, so the guy that I want to ask about is Keon Mitchell because every practice his
Yeah.
name is called, his name is there. Would you see him? That would be the only guy that I could say between. I liked your six, and I honestly think that it might go seven just because of what Mitchell has done. But I could see him being excuse me, I could see him being ahead of all.
The other guy, Ryan Henderson.
Oh, see, that's another one. That's not a good call. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Ryan Henderson would be another one
Ryan Henderson had been rolling with the ones
with the ones.
with
Right.
Fountain out before Opoko because Opoko had not been practicing
Right.
up until the scrimmage.
Right. Which
and
would seem to make him above
Dom Oliver.
Oliver and above Keon Mitchell.
Yeah, and potentially Wyatt Drager, depending on what side defensive end you're looking at.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So
yeah,
how many do you think how many things to go with?
That was another question I wanted to ask Coach Maddox that I didn't get a chance to Tuesday.
Right.
Could you play 9 guys on the line in a game?
I don't have any idea. I don't have any idea. And I think that, it's interesting because I think if the schedule had stayed as they planned it, I think they had done a genius job because I think you could have 2 quasi easy games in New Mexico State and Idaho State and you play 9.
Yeah.
There's no question it's easy. But they got to be good. I mean, they got to be good against Ohio if they're going to be able to win. Yeah. I think I'm interested also to see, does the Keon Mitchell replace Dalton and Alualu on passing downs?
Mm-hmm.
Or does Drager do that on passing downs? Or is there different combinations that you're gonna want to do? I mean, do you bring Garrett Fountain inside because they've obviously liked the speed and all that kind of stuff, and then that's when you have Dom Oliver on the outside with his great speed and you go that way. So I think there's still a lot of possibilities, but where would you see like this defensive line's overall strength? Like, yes, there's 9 guys who seemingly are in the mix, but going back to what Coach Maddox said, if you got 9, it may be because you don't have any. So where would you say like their relative strength is overall?
That's a question I don't know the answer to because we haven't seen these guys play in a real game.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if a pass rush is going to be their strength because we haven't seen them be pass rushers. Daniel Opoko, most of the snaps he got backing up, Keyshawn Banks last year, he wasn't necessarily a go rush around the right tackle and get a sack. He was a guy that was kind of just stout inside, try to hold up linemen. and maybe have the linebackers come behind him. He wasn't necessarily a pass rusher, but maybe that's something we can see from him. So to be honest with you, I don't know what the strength of the defensive line is
Isn't that
because we
something?
have so many guys we haven't seen.
Yeah.
I'd
No,
like
I
to
agree
say
with
they'll be good stopping the run, but I don't know that because I haven't seen those guys play together.
you. No, I agree with you. And I think as you know, I mentioned in an article, I think what makes that also hard is, the offensive line continues to have question marks. And so the idea
Yeah,
that they're competitive with each other could mean they're both not where they need to be. The flip side of it, it could mean that they're both good because the defensive line has been better, I think, overall. I think it's fair to say, than the offensive line in camp.
yeah.
Close for sure, but I would be like, I don't know, whatever numbers or percentages or 60-40, the defensive line has been better. But let's move to the linebackers. How about our boy Cody Moon? Had him on the podcast when announced that his intention to transfer to San Diego State, before he came on campus. But he was a monster on on Saturday at the scrimmage. What did you see from Cody Moon?
Well, he's just playing confident. I think he's kind of become comfortable in the role he's in as a will
Yeah,
linebacker,
yeah,
whether it's rushing the passer, dropping back in coverage. He said that was the one thing that he's really improved on is dropping back in coverage, and then just playing the run in a spot. I think he's a guy who's athletic. He can fly to the ball. He can drop back. He's got length. He's a good tackler. I mean, he had over 100 tackles last year at New Mexico. He's playing like at least he played in the scrimmage on Saturday like the guy that everybody thought was coming in. The reason why he was on so many preseason all conference teams, when if you looked at the depth chart, he wasn't even the starter,
right,
right? He was an or, right? But then you have Coach Maddox hyping up Brady Anderson, who's competing with him, and you're like, well, maybe Cody Moon won't even start despite being
right,
a preseason all conference guy. But
right.
now I think he's gotten to the point where you're like, okay, we know why he was so good last year. We know why he's on so many of those preseason lists, and that comfortableness is translating into production on the field, or at least
Yeah,
in scrimmages, not in real games. But
yeah.
we've seen what he does in real
Right,
games. We've
right.
seen what he does in real games because we saw it the last 2 years in New Mexico. And so no, I thought he played how I think I expected him to play once he got comfortable, and I think he's there.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. My favorite part about Cody Moon's Saturday was he met Jalen Armstead in the hole, and Jalen Armstead did what Jalen Armstead's capable of doing, fast feet, and he just juked, and he went by for a really big gain, his biggest gain I think of the evening. And then like the next two times he touched the ball, Cody Moon was bringing him down in the backfield, and that
Yeah.
kind of like competitiveness is what you is to me a big sign of guy who can play. A guy
Hmm.
who it's not an accident that he was back there in the backfield and he missed is what happened. And he usually doesn't miss, and he didn't miss again. And it was like, I mean, they were the plays were so close together. They were almost mirror images of him. But he made sure that he brought him down. And those two and a half tackles for loss, I think that's a really important thing because if there's something that if there's something that I think is still concerning about the defense is, and again, I mean, until they do it for 6 weeks or whatever, you're just not going to know. But the question marks continue is how many plays happen on the other side of the line of scrimmage. They can have guys who can be solid. They can have guys who can be around the ball. They can have guys, who can gang tackle. But do they have guys that can, it's 2nd and 6, and they turn it into 3rd and 8 instead of 3rd and 3 because they're able to split a gap and they're able to put somebody down in the backfield for that loss. And I thought that was the most encouraging part because I think of all of the defenders in the front six, I thought his presence was the most in the backfield. And I think
Yeah.
that's what they needed. And so I thought that was really good. Vaikaho, obviously starting, I thought he left some plays out there. I thought he had an opportunity. And again, there's no shame in missing Keenan Christian in space, but that's what you would hope a senior would be able to do. So I thought there was a couple things that he missed and had a couple opportunities that he had that he didn't quite finish. But I thought that his progression has been, really good. But I still have questions about Cooper McDonald. And it's not so much his physicality, his intelligence, none of those things. It's just the way that the offense was able to sometimes go wide, sometimes go up the middle, sometimes do a little screen here. Sometimes I just could not help but think of Caden McDonald as the Sam linebacker. They put him in the middle, they moved him back, and the moment they moved him back, all of those kind of weird misdirection things, they just weren't as successful anymore because he just had the ability to read the play, to disrupt it, even if he wasn't making the tackle. And I just wonder because Cooper, when we talked to him, said he's got to play like he plays the position, and I think that's really important. But in terms of the defense as a whole, what Caden McDonald brought in terms of being able just to sniff out a play before the snap, being able
Mhm.
to get out to a bubble screen, being able to get out to making the right read when it came to any sort of a read option, things of that nature, and just the fact that like you didn't see on any of those jet sweeps, you didn't see him or any of the defensive linemen be able to make that play. And obviously, I'd have to look at them again to see exactly which side they went to. But that's just a question that I have. And then finally, man, going out to the secondary, man, what did you see from the DBs in the scrimmage and how that's shaping up for the year?
I feel pretty good about the DBs, but the first two touchdowns were broken tackles in space. And you always go back to that Arizona game last year,
Always.
the first game, of
Yeah.
how many missed tackles they had on receivers in the slot. They cleaned it up most of the rest of the season. Fresno State game, maybe the exception,
Right.
but they cleaned it up. And I think those are the guys. I think the first one was Celestine on Shaw, and then I think it was a Coffee on Philippe Wesley.
I believe so. Yep.
So those are guys, they're safeties guys in the slot that are missed tackles. So I think, outside of that, they did give up a Balin Brooks had a catch, a deep catch where the corner, I forget who was covering him, kind of lost the ball. And it was kind of thrown like a flutter ball, and Balin just kind of turned and fell down with the ball into his stomach. And the corner was kind of looking the other way. Um,
That was number 20. The
Latavius
Aztec.
McGee.
Yeah, and he moved to Warrior for that play. Interestingly
Yeah.
enough. Yep.
So yeah, that's those are things that they need to clean up, and kind of reminds you of a little bit of the downfall of last year. But otherwise, I mean, I think I love the experience of the corners and the safeties. Add in Marcus Ratcliffe, obviously doesn't have the experience, but he's got the talent. I still think that the strength of the defense, although the linebackers are getting there, especially with Cody Moon getting to his comfort level. But I think you're gonna have to rely on them. I think they're gonna play a lot of man. Coach Hoke said that also on Tuesday after practice that we could be a big man team this year and blitz a lot with safeties and linebackers. And so they're going to rely on those corners and those warrior safeties covering in space, man to man. And if they're gonna do that, that means they have the coaching staff at least have the confidence in those guys to be able to step up, and then the players are gonna have to step up. But I like what I see from the secondary for the most part, at least going up against the San Diego State offense, right? We'll see once the real games start.
No, completely agree. And I would just say I think it's the same sort of comment that you had from Miles Moreau that you get a TCU transfer, you get a Texas transfer, and they don't just automatically leap the guys that are here. And I think it
Yeah.
speaks volume to what they've been able to build. But I think everything that you said is terrific. I'm really curious about Josh Butler, brought them together, Josh Hunter and Eric Butler. Just
Yeah.
where they're at. Obviously they shined really big in the first scrimmage, and just where are they prepared to bring those young guys? And it's seemingly shaping up to where you could have a veteran on the defensive line, the linebackers, and the young guys could be in the secondary. which I guess is the script, but going, normal football, but going into the season, I don't think anybody would have
Yeah.
guessed that the youth and inexperience would have been on the back end.
Yeah, definitely interesting. We're just excited to actually have real games to cover. Ohio is 9 days away. We will be working on our Ohio preview over the next few days, and we'll have that out early to mid next week. And then Saturday, August 26th, 4 p.m., Snapdragon Stadium.
No, I can't wait. It's great to be at football season, man. I mean that's just the bottom line. Football season is here. All of the preview articles, all of the what will it be, what will it be? Well, here it is, because this Ohio team is really, really good, and they're gonna have their work cut out for them to be able to start the season off at a high point.
Yep. All right, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed our discussion of the scrimmage on Saturday, plus, our 5 up, 5 down discussion. So stay tuned. Our next episode will have an interview with a non-football coach that Paul and I had a chance to chat with. And we'll probably get in a preview of the Ohio game. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hackberdian and Paul Garrison.